What's up guys, it's me Jeremy. So a few months ago I made a video for my updated list for skins that buff your champion, and thanks to all the wonderful comments on that video helping me out, as well as kind of a few things here and there that popped up recently, I've finally been able to compile another list of skins that's different from the other video that will as well provide you with a slight advantage in game compared to the classic skins of champions. Now before we jump into the exact list, there are a few things you need to understand first in order to see why this makes sense as a concept. So the first and most important thing I think to consider is that Riot has in the past multiple times changed or modified many skins before entirely because they had an effect on gameplay. More recently, Underworld Twisted Fate and Ravenborn LeBlanc were modified significantly and are no longer skins that have a minor adjustment to gameplay. And essentially the fact that Riot has changed multiple skins in the past entirely because they had an effect on gameplay is definitive proof that skins affecting gameplay is something that is actually possible, and Riot themselves have even admitted is also possible too. And this concept still exists today on quite a lot of skins, in the form of both skins that buff your champion and skins that nerf your champion. And the thing is that for many of these skins, they're very difficult for Riot to change or fix, since a lot of these effects would require changing significant portions of the skin or just completely downgrading them entirely, and thus Riot sees them as being unable to be changed, or perhaps simply just not worth changing. As well, it's worth noting that any advantages these skins provide is definitely pretty minor. I wouldn't say you're gonna win a game because you have one of the skins in this video. For the most part, they're kind of only applicable in very specific or niche situations. I think the key is to kind of think of these differences in like a really super chaotic team fight. In that situation, lots of things are going on, there's tons of stuff distracting you, things are flying all over the place, so a few differences in minor visual clarity can have somewhat of an impact in that kind of situation. Throughout the video, we'll be showing side-by-side comparisons of the skins in question so that you can clearly see the differences these skins have compared to their classic counterparts. It goes without saying, but skins obviously do not have any effect on stats, hitboxes, damage, or really just anything else that's actually coded into the game, but there are some key visual differences that can have an influence on things. There's definitely other skins than the ones covered in this video, so let me know in the comments which skin you think I missed, and if you enjoyed the video, please leave a like on it, and maybe if we get, let's say, 10,000 likes on this video, I'll make a part 3 in the future. But anyway, let's get started with the first skin. So first up, we have Battle Boss Brand. Now this is a particularly interesting one because this skin has an indicator for the passive stacks, which the default and other skins actually do not have any indicator for. It's pretty significant and probably would help you track the amount of passive stacks you have on your opponents. Next up, we have Blood Moon Yasuo, which makes it a little bit more difficult to tell if he has Tornado up, particularly in a really chaotic team fight. Essentially, the indicator for his Tornado has a lot less particles and is more difficult to see compared to other skins as well as the classic skin. Next up, we have SKT Nami. Now her E has a more visible indicator, which is going to help your AD carry or really just your allies in general notice it better. It can also help your enemies notice it more as well though, but I think it's probably more important for your allies to be able to realize when they have this ability cast on them. And next we have Lunar Guardian Warwick, which has a much better indicator on his W, specifically for the exact champion location when you're tracking a champion in the fog of war. It's really easy to know exactly where they are when they aren't in your vision, but you have your W active compared to his classic skin, which the particles for are a little bit more faint. And there's also Blood Moon Talon, and in this skin it's just generally easier to see how many stacks of passive you have on an opponent compared to the standard or other skins of Talon. Next we've got Devil Teemo and Omega Squad Teemo. Now these skins have indicators on the range of the explosion radius for his mushroom, which is going to help you tell if someone gets hit by it. It's especially useful because on the default skin the radius of the explosion is actually massive compared to the size of the explosion animation. So having the indicator is actually pretty useful since the animation is generally really misleading for the actual hitbox on this. There's also Nunubot, which is particularly interesting, as his ultimate has an indicator for you and your teammates to easily identify when exactly your ultimate is going to finish casting. Now you might think that this indicator is potentially a disadvantage since your enemies could see when your ult will finish, but there's actually been a Riot confirmation that in actuality this indicator is only visible to you and your teammates and is not visible to your enemies whatsoever, they just actually see an X where your number is. Therefore, it's strictly a positive, and since the indicator doesn't exist on any other skins, it does result in a very slight advantage. There's also Snow Day Bard, which has a much more obvious indicator for if your W is fully developed, as well as making it easier to tell the progress of when your W will proc to be the full heal effect, while the base skin has little to no indicator for the time it takes to proc the full heal W, while also being harder to tell the difference between the two types. There's also Pulsefire Twisted Fate. Now this one's a little bit weird. The indicator for vision on his ult for opponents actually looks really similar to Blue Trinket, so specifically for someone who has never played against this skin before or never seen it, it can be really easy to confuse the ult effect with a Blue Trinket effect and not actually know that Twisted Fate is ulting, and I think a lot of people who played against this skin, especially on PvE, made comments of that kind of thing happening. It also tends to be concealed a little bit better and be a lot more difficult to notice compared to the original classic TF ult indicator, and also the ultimate in this skin I think is a little bit quieter to hear, but I'm not fully sure about that one. Next up we've got Santa Braum, who's a skin that's kind of like one of our Thresh skins that we looked at in the previous video, where the way his back animation starts is actually really similar to the way his ult animation starts, so you can kind of fake people out with this animation if they aren't expecting it and you're using it to the fullest potential. Another one is Arctic Ops Gragas, which has actually gained a lot of popularity recently as the pros have been abusing this skin really heavily because the ultimate is so difficult to see. Essentially, it's just when you use your ultimate, the barrel is super difficult to see and it really blends into the background of Summoner's Rift, as well as with other animations. Notably, pro player Yankos actually said this skin is straight up pay to win and just provides a serious advantage. And overall, if you check the screenshots from some of the LCS gameplay, it definitely does make it look like the ultimate is just so hard to identify. There's also Arclight Vel'Koz, whose skill shots and animations are harder to see and tend to blend into the background and other particle effects a lot more. If you WQ at the same time on Vel'Koz, the abilities travel at nearly the same speed right on top of each other, and with the Arclight skin the effects are so bright that it's really hard to tell a W from a W and Q at the same time apart from each other. Next up we've got Pulsefire Caitlyn. Now her traps are visually a little bit larger. Normally this might not be a buff since the size of the trap is more realistic to the hitbox in this case and therefore easier for enemies to judge. But with Caitlyn, when you use traps, 95% of the time it's used as like a zoning tool since they have such a long delay on them to activate and they're kind of just flat on the ground for everyone to see and fairly easy to avoid, so having them be bigger and having enemies judge the zone of the trap as bigger is definitely actually an advantage for sure. Next up we've got Masked Shaco. Now his Q animation when viewing it from the Fog of War is definitely a lot more difficult to see than the classic skin. If you're not viewing it from the Fog of War, it's kind of the same, but when you're about to get ganked by a Shaco, it's a lot harder to spot this kind of like gray animation compared to the bright orange of the classic skin. There's also Headhunter Nidalee, who pretty infamously has a misleading animation on her Q spears compared to the size of the actual hitbox of the ability. And there's also Forecast Janna. Now that skin turns her tornadoes to be the color of dirt, so if you cast them on areas in the map that are dirt instead of grass or just the ground is dirt colored, it can actually be really hard to see, especially if it's like a really chaotic team fight. Next up we have the traditional Trundle skin, and in this skin it can be really difficult to see exactly where his W is, especially when you're in the river, since it kind of just blends in with the background so well. Next up, there's Lancer Blitzcrank. This skin is definitely more about the sounds. The Q on this skin in particular is really quiet compared to every other Blitzcrank skin, to the point where you really have to listen for it to notice it. It also kind of just sounds and looks completely different to the original skin, so it can be kind of confusing to tell what's going on if you've never actually played versus this skin before. Now the next one we're looking at is the Green Chroma Omega Tristana skin, which can actually really kind of work like camouflage. The green color scheme used on this skin is very similar to the green colors used on Summoner's Rift itself, and it kind of just makes you harder to see as a result. And I also read a lot of comments that said the Omega Squad Tristana has a much smoother auto attack animation and makes it a lot easier to auto attack. I'm not fully sure about that one, but I did find a lot of people who said they had an easier time CSing using the Omega Squad Tristana skin. Next up, there's Dawnbringer Riven, who has a lot more fluid animations on her combos and generally just makes it a lot easier to pull off your combos faster and animation cancel more efficiently. And there's also Lunar Wraith Caitlyn, who's noted for having super smooth and really awesome auto attack animations that make it a lot easier to play with, and animation cancel kind of maximize the timing as well as for just kind of CSing in general. And next up, we've got God King Darius's faster W/auto attack animation. The enhanced auto attack on this skin is actually almost instant, and the animation finishes almost twice as fast compared to the base skin of Darius. It seems that the difference here is that with the skin, it makes it so that the damage hits the opponent when the blade also hits the opponent, rather than the other skins where the animation is slower, and so the opponent actually takes damage before the animation finishes, and then kind of does like a follow-through swing. This is definitely going to make it a lot easier to animation cancel because the animation in general is just a lot faster and more accurate. And actually, I think that's just about going to wrap it up. Now, that's just about all the skins I could get for this video. I kind of have to admit though, finding skins like this is not easy. It takes probably about hundreds of hours of research and nitpicking at like thousands of skins in the game to put together a really short, simple list like this. Because the truth is that most skins in League of Legends do not actually buff your champion. So if you appreciate the effort and research I put into this video, hit that like button and make sure to subscribe to be notified of future videos like this one. Let me know in the comments if there's any skins you think I missed for this topic, and with your help, if I can figure out another list, I'll definitely make a part 3 of this video in the future. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.